EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody, to a Tuesday edition of Birds 365. It's officially October 1st. Johnny Mack, we made it through the first month of the NFL season. Eagles sitting at 2-2. How you doing on this October 1st?
I didn't even realize it. Happy Halloween month, everybody, I guess. So, yeah, it's getting...
Are you a Halloween person, John?
Well, not anymore. I'm a little old for Halloween, but I enjoy the fall colors. At least a little bit of a change up.
And say I'm a Halloween guy myself.
I don't enjoy the leaf cleanup, though. So I guess overall I wouldn't be, too much leaf cleanup.
Yeah, let's get into some Eagles stuff this morning. I want to welcome everybody in. Thanks to BetUS, by the way, for sponsoring our 2-hour show today. So go to betus.com.pa. Big shout out to them for there's Twitch saying Red October month. Yeah, we'll see what the Phillies are able to do this month. Appreciate all of our members in the chat this morning and all of our viewers. Good to see everybody in here. Tuesday, coming off an overreaction Monday. Felt like the sky was falling a little bit. Johnny Mack yesterday. You talked me off the ledge a little bit. Nick Sirianni spoke yesterday. Any takeaways from what Nick had to say yesterday? A couple things I saw that he said making the headlines as he continues to just talk.
I didn't really look at what other people were talking about. From my perspective, I'm concerned about the defense and the defensive scheme, which should be no surprise for anybody who listens to this program. But it's interesting because I've talked to Nick about this in the past, and this is the first time he's had an experienced defensive coordinator, unless you want to count Matt Patricia, but that was, a weird situation. And he's had very young coordinators in the past, and he's had no problem, putting his foot down. And for instance, 2021, when he first got here, we had a lot of the same complaints about the coverage and how soft it was. And, he went into Jonathan Gannon and said, look, we got to tighten it up. We got to, I get what we're trying to do as far as limiting explosive plays, but it's got to be a happy medium. And things kind of took off, and they were a top 10 defense despite a lack of talent. And then the next year they really took off and had one of the best defenses in the NFL. And here we are, same complaints, same problem, which should be no surprise to people because they're running the same scheme. So, but this time you got a veteran guy with a reputation and all that, and nobody's going to question Vic Fangio, and nor should they, and all that kind of narrative. And, I asked Nick, probably not the best question he wanted to hear, but does he feel comfortable saying, hey, Vic, we got to tighten this up like he did to Jonathan Gannon?
Yeah, it's a completely fair question.
Oh, it's fair.
Yeah.
But that's where we are. That's not where they wanted to be, I guarantee you, after 4 weeks of the season. Right. So I know everybody's focused about the offense and the terrible offense and this and that. That's about players not being out there. That will take care of itself with AJ and Devontae and Lane Johnson. That will take care of itself to a certain degree. Now, then you can talk about where they should be when those guys are back. When you don't have those guys, you're going to have some troubles. So, not that I'm excusing it, because they could have played better on the offensive side, obviously. But again, I think it takes care of itself to a large degree. Defensively, they got some issues. And they're not going away unless they fix them, because there's not all pro talent on the bench that's coming back from injury, which is what's going to happen on the offensive side. So to me, that's the biggest issue, and that's most now. And I'm going to get to talk to Vic Fangio today. Reporters, it's coordinator day, and I'm sure the primary focus from his perspective is going to be on the tackling, and maybe that takes care of all the problems. To be honest, at least from the perspective of, look, if you're going to play off coverage, you got to tackle. And if you miss 12 to 16 tackles, depending on which service you like, True Media, Pro Football Focus, Next Gen Stats, had him at 16. missed tackles. You're probably not talking about the coverage as much, but I think it's
that's just a joke. I mean, 16 missed tackles. That is just insane.
yeah. Well, 12 is insane.
Yeah.
And True Media had him at I think 11. PFF had him at 12. Next Gen Stats had him at 16. So they're a little that. And by the way, that also tells you the subjectiveness of those numbers. But
Yeah.
Either way, it ain't good. When you're at that level, it ain't good. So that will, if you tighten that part of your and you should. I mean, that's just a bad day, and you can bring the weather into it, and guys being gassed and all that kind of stuff. But you got to play in the conditions like any weather game. You got to play in January in Green Bay. You got to go to January in Green Bay, and you got to play. And for many years, I think the Bucs are the best example. I wrote about this yesterday. And if you go back to the championship game here, that was the second game they won in under 40 degrees in their history. And they came into the league in 1976. You got to play in the weather, whether it's cold or whether it's extremely hot, and you got to find a way to persevere. So that's not going to be an excuse.
One of my biggest things with this defense is, they're just so damn inconsistent. I mean, how do you go from a world beater a week ago versus the Saints looking, like what we were hoping they looked like, even better than that maybe, and then you fall off a cliff again, and you're you can't stop Baker Mayfield, and they put up 470 yards or whatever it was on us, and it's not even a good running team, and they ran for 150 plus yards or whatever. I don't get the inconsistency.
Not the same. In a weird way, like I say, styles make fights. That's the old axiom in boxing. Sure. New Orleans, with all their explosiveness, they play 12 personnel. They play max protection. They try to run the football. You can play those 5, and he even played the 6-man fronts. Nobody plays more 11 personnel than Tampa Bay, and they're out there in their nickel, which has been when they're bad. When they're out there with their nickel defense, their 4-man front, and the extra corner, that's when they've been bad. Each game is not a vacuum. So when you talk about that, everybody's got a different game plan. Everybody plays a little bit differently. Obviously, there's a lot of copycats in the league, and there's only so much. They're going to see more 11 personnel than Saints type of football. I guarantee you that. So they better fix it. But yeah, I mean, the Saints were just a good matchup in hindsight. And the fact that they played the way the Eagles want to play, or at least played the way the Eagles can play right now defensively, and be successful. Whereas the Bucs, balls out quick, spreading the field, no pass rush, coverage is soft, and you can't tackle, and you got what you got.
I'm talking to Vic today, Johnny Mac. What's on your mind as you go into that? What do you want to hear from Vic Fangio as a reporter after a game like that, after inconsistency like this through the first weeks of the season? I know you only get to ask 1 or 2 questions, but what are some of the things you want to hear or you want to be asked from Vic Fangio today after a performance like that?
Well, I think, number one, we don't want to hear anything. We want.
No, but there's certain questions. I mean, that
we want to hear what he says, and that's our job. So just from that standpoint, I think, and I'm not saying that from your perspective. I think a lot of fans don't realize that. Like, what is John? I don't want to hear anything. I want to hear what he has to say and explain what.
But there's an art to asking the questions to get some.
Well, with the coverage, with the off-man coverage and the lack of press coverage. I mean, part of it's just baked in. So a lot of people are hyper focused on that. But the numbers, and I would imagine, unfortunately, I don't even want to bring up the numbers to Vic because he'll immediately dispute them and say, as I just said, with the subjective nature of tacklings, I just get, True Media, Pro Football Focus, and Next Gen, they all have a different number. So this 88% numbers floating around, if you say 88%, he's going to dispute it. I guarantee that. So I'm not going that direction, but I do want to phrase it in a way where, there's a lot of off coverage. There's a lot of soft coverage. I already know the reason why, but you want to hear, is there a happy medium when you're struggling? So something of that nature. I think that's number one on the list. And then number two on the list is personnel driven. For me, it's Bryce Huff. Like, again, I'm at the point where he can't be this bad. So I don't think the coaching staff is utilizing him properly. And maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe believe me, I'm open
Isn't that
to
kind
that.
of giving Bryce a pass, though? Like, Vic
Well,
Fangio's been around
I
for-
don't think it's giving him a pass from the perspective of, I want to see them try it. And then if it doesn't work, if you want to call that a pass, fine. I don't know the definition, but like, I think there's this assumption that, when I say, or anybody says that Vic is, and Vic uses this because he's a smart guy, his defense is gap and a half. It's not really aggressive. It's more read and react, and he'll balk at that, but it is. But the reason he balks at that is because that's just the base. That's just the default setting, so to speak, the Control-Alt-Delete setting for the Eagles defense. If it's 3rd and 15, you got wide 9 guys out there, playing aggressive football, trying to get the quarterback. Now, in those types of situations, which have been too rare, but when you do get in that situation, I would love for them to design something to get Bryce Huff loose, even if it's once or twice early in the game. And if he falters at that, all right, go back to what you're doing and say, hey, Bryce, but right now you're having a player who's proven, again, I go back to the Jets writers and Rich Cimini, and he's proven he can get to the quarterback in a limit, in a limited role, but he's proven he can get to the quarterback at the NFL level when he's in those types of aggressive situations. And the Eagles haven't utilized it. So why aren't they utilizing it? That's a concern to me. And then, from a standpoint of guys playing poorly, Nakobe Dean, unfortunately, I think would lead that list.
He's been terrible.
He's not been good. At some point you got to say, well, maybe there's just not that good. And maybe that's the case. Maybe I'll get to that case with Bryce Huff. I think
where I think many are getting to, whether it's the scheme or not. I think many are getting to, hey, this dude just can't play. I mean, he struggles to get off any block.
Maybe. But how do you explain the Jet? Like the difference between Nakobe Dean and again, it's still limited, and I expect Nakobe to get a little bit better. Is he's played a little bit at the NFL level before he got hurt. He wasn't good last year, and now he's played 4 games and he hasn't been good this year. So now you're up to 8, 9 games, and he hasn't played good. Bryce has has stuff in the can that says he can play good. That to me is the difference. It wasn't in this city, so people don't care, but it existed, and it's NFL football, and that hasn't existed yet with Nakobe. So, but I still think Nakobe's got an opportunity to get better. The problem is, I think the ceiling is kind of limited. I think we've seen the ceiling, and that's on Howie Roseman, and maybe they're both on Howie Roseman because they don't dump assets, and everybody's happy with Zach Bond. But essentially, with Zach Bond, he's played 2 good games, 2 really good games, and 2 poor games. So you talk about that consistency in week to week. And, maybe that's what you're going to have, the best case scenario with a $3.5 million player,
That's not dumping assets. I mean, the problem with the defense, John, is that the first round draft picks, there's 3 of them on the damn defensive line, and they're hit or miss. They show up when they want to show up. I mean, look, this is the Howie Roseman is going to come into the crosshairs eventually with this, John. And it's not entirely wrong talking about Bryce Huff, a $17 million acquisition, who's underperforming drastically. You're talking about 3 first-round picks, 2 of them underperforming in a big way. One of them just shows up some days, and some days he doesn't, show up. That's your defense. If those dudes step up, we're not having these conversations about the defense. But Howie's going to have to eventually answer for some of those picks, no? Nakobe Dean, a 3rd-round pick. That's another guy. I know you're not maybe expecting 3rd-round picks to be world beaters, but you got a piece of defense together, and that's
they expect, a lot of Eagles fans expect 6th-round picks to be world beaters. So, look, Nolan Smith has played a little bit better, but not great. Jordan Davis has been a disappointment. He's in the disappointment category for me. Jalen Carter is like, I think Jalen Carter showed up. The guy's playing, I don't know how many snaps, and
that was good.
Tapping out to the Heat eventually. But my God, that's not the day to say Jalen Carter's not giving effort. And he's getting double teamed coming off that Saints game, so he played 52 snaps. In that kind of heat, getting double teamed virtually every play coming off the Saints game. So I don't think he played poorly. The problem is when people are sliding protection to him, other guys got to show up. And other than Brandon Graham and Josh Sweat, who are both playing well, all the young players are even Milton Williams. I know everybody's excited about Milton Williams. I love Milton personally. He's been nothing. And this is a contract year for him where he really wanted to show out and make some big money, whether it's here or somewhere else. And he's just been average. Moro Ajomo, people are excited about him because it's more unknown.
It's starting to feel like this whole scheme, and I know we've been critical of it, but it's starting to feel like it's like a talent killer. It takes great players, and it's just like that. Everybody can. Maybe that's why the Dolphins hated it.
Well, maybe I go the other side. Maybe more of the talent is overrated. Look, guys show up. Really good players show up no matter the scheme. They might not like it. Fletcher Cox didn't like it when he went from Jim Schwartz to Jonathan Gannon, but he showed up eventually, even as an aging player. Khalil Mack played well in this defense. When he was Defensive Player of the Year, big time players are going to show up, no matter the scheme. And for the you look at Miami last night. Oh, Mike McDaniel, what an offense! What an offense! But people, I saw the first guy, and I'm not naming names because I'm sure he's not the first. I'm saying the first guy I saw, I knew it was coming, but the first guy I saw who said, "This is not Kellen Moore's offense. This is Nick Sirianni's offense," coming off the Tampa Bay game. I'm like, people who think like that need help.
Well, I have a question on that real quick. And we have Caden Steele. We're going to get to a break in a second here. Bring up Caden. Caden, I see you in the green room, brother. We're getting to you in a minute. Appreciate everybody in the chat. We talk about this offense, John. And I did see somebody do a breakdown. Like, this doesn't look like Kellen Moore's offense.
Come on.
No, I'm not going there. But let me finish.
I'm not saying
Is it more on everybody immediately goes to, so it's Nick Sirianni's offense. Is it possible it's the quarterback? Where this is the offense that they're creating around his skill set.
Oh, God, yeah. They created the offense around the quarterback. That was the thing that I think frustrated.
Is that why it still looks the same? Because they can't do much of the other stuff that Kellen did in the past, because that's not what Jalen Hurts does.
Well, on Sunday, they couldn't do anything. They were the number 2 offense in the NFL, granted, small sample size. On Sunday, they didn't have freaking A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Lane Johnson. Why is it so hard for people to understand that? Should they have persevered a little bit better? Should they have had better style points? Sure. but they were always, I predicted them to score 17 points. And that was probably being, generous in my mind. What are people expecting? They were number 2. It all looked great. It's Kellen Moore's this and Kellen Moore's that. You got what you want. Then a bunch of guys get injured and you look like shit, which tends to happen in the NFL. Why is it so surprising? No, Nick took over because AJ's not in there and Devontae's not. He conveniently took over to protect Kellen Moore. People are morons. I'm sorry.
Get to a couple super chats, John, before we get to our break. We'll talk more about this with Caden Steele coming up next. Did you see the Darius Slay stuff? Trey Brown checks in. Is there a way to get rid of Darius? Bad teammate. Everybody's not happy about that, which I do think. I mean, come on, Slay. You got to read the room. I think especially when you're wearing a C on your chest, you got to read the room. All,
Slay is not a bad teammate. That is incorrect.
Well,
I mean, the problem with fans and Slay is a very uplifting person. And he's friends with everybody, and he likes to uplift players everywhere around the league. That's what he does. I go back to, and I know we got to get to Caden, so I don't want to go deep into my basketball analogies. But in the old days when Julius Erving was strangling Larry Bird on the cover of Sports Illustrated, and then it changed to Isaiah Thomas and Magic Johnson kissing each other at the center court, it's different. It's a different world. These guys are all friends. Is there competitiveness? It's like a college-like environment. It's a fraternity, and they have a lot of respect for each other. And guys, when they change jerseys and things like that, that's not to say there isn't some anger and some things like that in a physical game, but for the most part, they're not going to play. They're not going to go, woe is me, and show the emotion. And you can't. You really can't.
Yeah, I know.
You got to get back to work the next day.
You got to read the room. They just got destroyed by Baker Mayfield's box, and the next day he's popping up talking.
Well, that part, I mean, the PR part of it, yes,
that's what I'm talking. I get they're going to be friends. I have no issue with that. They're all humans, man. I get it. They're playing a game.
The PR part of it, I agree with you. But remember, when you're playing public relations, you're doing it. You're not being honest. So I don't. From a personal perspective, I don't care with stuff like that. I literally don't care. But the only thing I will say to the questioner is he's not a bad teammate. You might not like what he does, and you might not like that he embraces players on other teams. And most fan bases don't like that. And I get it why, but that's just PR shit. I mean, he's a great.
He might not be. I don't think he's a bad teammate, but you could argue he shouldn't have a C on his chest if you're going to act like that.
Well, he got voted to be a C on his chest by his teammate,
which might give you an inkling into the the culture of inside the locker room.
Not deserving his own teammates, but Nick didn't decree captains. They got voted by their teammates.
Let's get to our commercial break. We have 3 more super chats we'll get to. I'm going to get to all of them. I want to get to our commercial break so we can get to Caden Steele. Do appreciate James Carver, Alexander Harris, and Saquads. We will get to you guys. Always get all the super chats. So thank you guys for the support this morning. Let's get to our commercial break. Before I do that, everybody, I want to remind you of BetUS. Go to betus.com.pa. Use that promo code YouTube150. That gives you a 150% sign-up bonus on your first deposit and 125% on your second and third deposit. So go to betus.com.pa. They have the fastest payouts in the industry. They have 24/7 customer support, and they'll even give you up to 10% back on your losses twice a year. So if you place some losing bets, you can recoup some of that money. So go to betus.com.pa. That's betus.com.pa and use the promo code YouTube150. Birds 365. Back in 3 minutes, everybody.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.